AITA. My husband says I don't own any of our 3 houses. I refuse to pay my half of the mortgage and bills until my husband agrees to make me the owner of the houses. I honestly do not even know where to begin with this, because my entire world feels like it has been flipped upside down, and I am still trying to wrap my head around how we even got here. For context, I am 35 years old, and my husband Michael is 37. We have been together for a total of 13 years, married for 10 of those years, and for most of that time, I genuinely believed we were a team. We built our lives together from what felt like the ground up. We were not handed anything. Every financial step we took it together, or at least I thought we did. When we first got married, we were not exactly in the best place financially. We were both working decent jobs, but nothing that made us particularly wealthy, and we were juggling student loans, car payments, and the general cost of living. But we had a dream, the same dream I think a lot of couples have. We wanted to own property. We wanted to build something for ourselves, something we could pass down if we ever had kids, something that would give us security as we got older. That dream was not just some vague idea we talked about in passing. It was something we planned for, researched together, and actively worked toward for years. I was the one who spent hours scrolling through listings, bookmarking homes that had potential, running numbers in spreadsheets to see what we could afford, and imagining what renovations might cost. Michael would get just as excited as I did when we found a house that felt right, and we would tour them together, talking about which rooms could be offices, which ones could be guest rooms, how we could update kitchens or redo floors. It felt like a shared passion, something we were both equally invested in, and that is why what I learned recently feels like such a betrayal. Over the years, we managed to buy not just one house, but 3. The first house is the one we live in, and the other 2 are rental properties that provide us with a decent stream of income. Or at least I thought they provided us with income. Every mortgage payment, every renovation, every new roof, appliance, landscaping project, I paid half. Always. Without question. We have always had a shared bank account for household expenses, but I also contributed directly from my personal account any time a major bill came up. I never once imagined that those houses were anything but ours. Ours as a couple, as a team, as 2 people building a future together. A few weeks ago, Michael and I got into a fight. Honestly, I do not even remember what started it, probably something stupid, something that would have blown over in an hour, but somewhere in the middle of it, he said something that stopped me cold. I do not even remember the exact words, but it was something along the lines of, "Well, they are my houses, so I will decide what happens with them." At first, I laughed because I thought he was just being dramatic, trying to one-up me in the heat of the moment. I said something like, "What do you mean, your houses? They are ours. We both pay for them." And that is when he got quiet. Too quiet. That silence stretched just a little too long, and my stomach started twisting in knots because I could see it all over his face. There was something he was not telling me. When I pushed him on it, he tried to backpedal, saying he just meant it as a figure of speech, but my gut would not let it go. So after we both calmed down, I decided to dig a little deeper. I pulled out every document I could find for all 3 houses, the purchase agreements, the deeds, the mortgage papers, and my name was nowhere. Not once. Not even as a co-owner. Every single piece of paperwork had only his name on it. I felt like I could not breathe. At first, I thought there had to be some mistake. Surely, this was an oversight, a clerical error, something we could fix. But when I confronted Michael about it, he shrugged and said he had done it that way on purpose. According to him, my credit score was lower than his back when we started buying property, something I was aware of because of my student loans, and he thought it would be easier to get approved for loans if only his name was on them. But no one ever told me that was the plan. No one ever asked me if I was okay with that. And it was not just the first house, it was all 3. For the entire decade we have been buying, renovating, and renting out these properties, I was operating under the assumption that we owned them together. But legally, they are his. Only his. I felt humiliated. Not just because of the financial betrayal, though that was a huge part of it, but because of the way it made me feel like a guest in my own home. Like all the time, money, and energy I put into these houses meant absolutely nothing. Every evening spent painting walls, every weekend at Home Depot picking out tile and fixtures, every hour I spent screening tenants and handling leases, it was all for property that legally belonged to someone else. When I told Michael how betrayed I felt, he acted like I was blowing everything out of proportion. He said I was being childish, that I was his wife, and that of course everything that is his is mine too. But I am not stupid. I know that the law does not work that way. If something were to happen to us, if we divorced, if he died, if he decided to sell one of the properties without my input, I would have no legal claim to any of it. I would be left with nothing but the bills I helped pay and the memories of the work I put in. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I told Michael, calmly but firmly, that until my name is on the deeds to all 3 properties, I will not be paying another cent toward the mortgages, utilities, or maintenance. If they are his houses, they are his responsibility. If I am nothing more than an unofficial, undocumented tenant in my own home, then I will act like one. He told me I was being ridiculous, that I was trying to hold our finances hostage over a technicality, but to me, this is not just some minor issue. It is about trust, respect, and whether or not I am an equal partner in my own marriage. Now he is pouting, telling me I am being manipulative, that I am damaging our financial stability for no reason, and that I am being paranoid over something that does not matter because we are family. But it does matter. It matters because I thought we were building something together, and now I feel like I have been used as free labor and a financial cushion while he quietly kept all the legal benefits for himself. So now I am asking, am I the asshole for refusing to pay my half of the mortgage and bills until my name is on those deeds? Or am I right to stand my ground and demand that the financial partnership I thought we had actually exists on paper? Update 1. A week has passed since I told Michael I would not pay another cent towards the mortgages, bills, or maintenance until my name was on the deeds. At first, he treated the whole thing like a joke, like I was having some kind of dramatic tantrum that would blow over in a day or two. He would smirk whenever I brought it up, calling me his little, financial terrorist, in this condescending, playful tone that made my skin crawl. Every time I tried to have a serious conversation about the fact that I had been pouring my money into properties I had no legal claim to, he would dismiss it with some variation of, "It's all ours, I do not understand why you are so obsessed with paperwork." As if my financial security and basic respect in my own marriage was some kind of meaningless hobby I had decided to take up out of boredom. But when the first bill came due, and I didn't transfer my usual half into our joint account, something shifted. The smirk disappeared, replaced by this cold, simmering frustration that clung to every conversation we had after that. He told me I was being manipulative, that I was using money to blackmail him into getting my way, and that this was not how married couples were supposed to operate. I told him I was not blackmailing him, I was protecting myself, because clearly I was the only one who would. I said if the houses belonged to him, the bills belonged to him too. That was the moment his anger really started to show, because under all his bravado and casual dismissiveness, I think a part of him had never truly believed I would follow through. That was also when the revisionist history started. Suddenly, Michael was telling me that I had never contributed as much as he did. According to him, he had always carried the majority of the financial burden, and it was unfair, even greedy, for me to demand equal rights to property I had not really paid for. That was when I snapped. I spent an entire afternoon combing through our financial records, digging up every transfer, every receipt, every screenshot of my bank account showing payments I made directly for repairs, renovations, new appliances, even the furniture. I printed it all out, a small mountain of paper, and laid it across the kitchen table. Page after page, line after line, month after month of contributions, all showing that I had paid exactly half, and in some months, even more than half, when Michael's accounts ran low or unexpected expenses popped up. I expected him to back down after seeing the numbers in black and white. I thought, maybe naively, that faced with that undeniable evidence, he would at least admit that I had every right to ask for legal recognition of what was already true in practice. But instead of owning up to the lie, he doubled down. He said the money I paid was just me helping out, like I was some temporary roommate chipping in for groceries and utilities, not an equal partner in a long-term financial enterprise. According to him, I had offered to cover extra costs when money was tight, so those months didn't count. When I pointed out how ridiculous that was, that I had offered because I thought I was paying for our properties, not his personal investments, he had the audacity to roll his eyes like I was some gold digger trying to cash in on his hard work. That argument alone would have been enough to shatter my trust, but what happened next is what really sent me into a spiral. While I was pulling up all the documents, I decided to check the ownership records for the rental properties again, just to make sure I hadn't missed anything. That is when I saw it. One of the houses, the smaller rental that we always referred to as the starter investment, does not even legally belong to Michael. It belongs to his mother. Her name is the only name on the title, the mortgage, everything. I was so confused at first, because I had no idea how that was even possible. We bought that house together, or so I thought, toured it together, picked out paint colors together, and agreed on rental terms together. But legally, I have no connection to it, and neither does Michael. When I confronted him, the explanation was so casual it made my head spin. He said that about 5 years ago, when his mother was having some financial troubles, he decided to put that house in her name as a way to help her out. He never mentioned it because, in his words, it was just a formality, a temporary arrangement that did not really matter. But it does matter, because not only did I help pay the mortgage and maintenance on a house that legally belongs to someone else, someone who has never contributed a dime toward it, but his mother has also been receiving a portion of the rent payments directly into her personal account this entire time. She has literally been profiting off a house I partially paid for, and I had no idea. All these years, I thought we were building our future together, but part of my money has been going to fund his mother's retirement. I felt physically ill when I realized just how deep the deception went. This is not just about my name not being on the deeds, it is about the fact that I have been financially entangled in properties I have no legal claim to, no control over, and no say in, while people outside of our marriage quietly benefit from my labor and my money. This is not just a breach of trust. It is a fundamental disrespect for everything I have contributed to this marriage, this life we built, or at least I thought we were building. When I told Michael that this was no longer just about legal ownership but about basic respect, I expected some level of guilt or remorse. Instead, he exploded. He accused me of being obsessed with appearances and paperwork, of caring more about claiming assets than preserving our marriage, of being selfish and small-minded. He said I was trying to punish his mother for something that was none of my business, that I was blowing everything out of proportion, and that I was the one destroying our family, not him, not his lies, not his secret financial dealings. And then, without another word, he grabbed his keys, said he needed to clear his head, and drove straight to his mother's house. He got angry, said I was destroying our family because of the papers, and went to his mom. Update 2. After Michael stormed out and went to his mother's house, I sat alone in the silence of our living room. I remember staring at the walls, the furniture, the photos we had picked together, and wondering how much of this life was even real. The anger and adrenaline from the argument were still thrumming under my skin, but beneath it all was something much colder, the sinking sense that I had only scratched the surface of whatever was going on. I needed answers, real ones, not Michael's evasions and deflections. So I did something I should have done years ago. I reached out to a lawyer I knew. She was someone I had met through a friend, a specialist in family law and real estate. I told her the whole story, from the initial discovery that my name was missing on the deeds to the revelation about his mother owning one of the properties. She listened carefully, asking questions that made my stomach twist because I did not have the answers, basic questions like whose name was on the bank accounts, where exactly my money had been going, and whether there were any trusts or legal structures involved. The first thing she told me to do was go through my bank transfers, every payment I had made for the so-called mortgages over the years. I pulled up my online banking history, tracing back payment after payment, and every single one had gone to an account in Michael's name. Not to the bank, not to a mortgage lender, but to a personal account listed under his name alone. I sat there for what felt like an hour, just scrolling and staring at the endless trail of my money flowing into an account I had never even thought to question. I asked my lawyer what this meant, and she did not sugarcoat it. Legally, those transfers could be interpreted as gifts, not investments, not shared marital contributions, just gifts from a wife to her husband. All my efforts to contribute, to be an equal partner, could be erased with the stroke of a legal argument. My stomach churned, and my hands shook as I realized how easily I had been cut out of everything without ever knowing it. But that was only the beginning. My lawyer offered to help me request copies of all the official property records, the full ownership histories, not just the current deeds. She warned me that if there were trusts, transfers, or other arrangements, they would show up there. I thought I was ready to face whatever those papers would reveal, but when they arrived, I realized I had severely underestimated just how deep this rabbit hole went. The two rental houses, the ones we bought together after we were married, were not listed as standard purchases between spouses. Both were officially recorded as gifts from family. One was transferred from Michael's mother, the other from some distant aunt I have never even met. According to the documents, these properties had been in the family for years, passed down as part of some generational wealth scheme, except I knew that was a lie. I was there when we toured both houses. I was there when we sat at the kitchen table going over listings, debating which one made the most sense. I was there when we walked through the empty rooms and imagined the renovations. I remember the peeling wallpaper, the smell of dust and stale air, the way Michael had stood in the doorway and said, "This could be our first real investment." There was no gift. There was no aunt. We bought those houses together. Or so I thought. But the worst discovery was the one that concerned the house we live in, the home I thought was the heart of everything we had built. That house was not technically owned by Michael either, at least not in the way I expected. It had been purchased through a trust created before we were even married. That single fact meant that no matter how much money I had poured into it, no matter how many renovations I had done with my own hands, no matter how many bills I had paid, I had no legal claim to the house at all. The trust predated our marriage, which meant it was considered separate property. Untouchable in a divorce. Even if I fought for it, even if I took this to court and bared every financial document we had, the law would side with the trust. When Michael came home, I was waiting with all the documents spread out across the table. I did not yell. I did not cry. I just laid it all out, piece by piece, explaining everything I had uncovered. I watched his expression shift from confusion to frustration to something I can only describe as weary resignation, like a man who had been caught in a lie so big he no longer had the energy to defend it. When I asked him how long he had been planning all of this, he shook his head and said I was overcomplicating things. According to him, it was all just family stuff, things his mother had set up to protect the family assets. That was the moment he let it slip. His mother had been behind all of it. From the moment we got engaged, she had been pushing Michael to keep the properties out of my reach. Not because of anything I had done, not because I had ever given her a reason to distrust me, but because, in her words, she never trusted women who marry into the family. To her, I was always a risk, a threat to the precious family legacy, someone who might swoop in, divorce Michael, and walk away with half of their beloved properties. Every time I thought about the quiet moments I had spent with his mother over the years, the holidays, the birthdays, the polite small talk in her kitchen, it felt like a layer of my skin was being peeled away. Every smile, every offer of coffee, every fake compliment was delivered by a woman who was working behind the scenes to cut me out of my own marriage's finances. She had never seen me as family. She saw me as a ticking time bomb, a liability to be managed and excluded at all costs. Now I sit here, alone in the house I helped pay for but do not legally own, wondering how much of my marriage was even real. Was Michael always like this? Was I blind, or did his mother's paranoia slowly twist him into someone who saw me as a financial threat rather than a partner? Every memory we made in this house feels tainted now. Every coat of paint, every piece of furniture I picked, every meal we cooked in a kitchen I thought was ours. I have been trying to wrap my head around what to do next. Part of me wants to fight, to demand my fair share, to refuse to be erased from the financial life I helped build. But another part of me feels so profoundly tired, like I have been living in someone else's game without even knowing the rules. The thought of divorce feels like admitting defeat, like giving up on the life I thought we were building together. But I am starting to think about divorce, and it hurts me to even think about it after so many years together. Update 3. After that last confrontation, when Michael stormed off to his mother's house and I was left sitting in our living room with a pile of legal documents and a sense of absolute betrayal, I realized I needed to physically remove myself from the situation. I packed a small bag and went to stay with my sister for a few days, telling Michael through a short text that I needed space to think and that I would contact him when I was ready to talk. He didn't respond right away, and for once, I was relieved. The silence was better than another round of gaslighting, deflection, and accusations of me being the one destroying our marriage. At my sister's place, I finally had the time and mental clarity to take stock of everything, not just emotionally, but financially. I decided that if I was going to fight for my rights, I needed hard, indisputable numbers. I met with a financial advisor, someone my sister had worked with before during her own divorce, and together we started reconstructing a detailed, itemized history of every single financial contribution I had made to those 3 properties since the day we got married. Every down payment, every wire transfer, every direct payment for repairs, furniture, landscaping, property taxes, insurance premiums, and even those countless Target and Home Depot runs for things like paint, light fixtures, and garden supplies. It took hours, combing through old credit card statements, joint account records, even Venmo transactions, but by the end, we had a comprehensive timeline showing that I hadn't just contributed my fair share. In some years, I had paid more than Michael had. Seeing it all laid out so plainly was both validating and infuriating. For so long, I had gaslit myself into believing we were equals in this partnership, 2 people building a future together. Now, with the numbers in front of me, I couldn't deny the truth anymore. I had been financially invested in properties that I legally had no claim to, while Michael and his mother treated me like a guest who should be grateful just to have a roof over her head. After a few days, I went home, not because I was ready to forgive, but because I was ready to confront. When I walked into the house, Michael wasn't alone. His mother was sitting at the kitchen table, a self-satisfied smile curling at the edges of her mouth, and in front of her was a neat, professionally bound folder. Before I could even put down my bag, she slid the folder across the table and informed me that she and Michael had drafted a formal family contract to resolve all this unpleasantness. According to her, if I signed it, it would officially settle the matter and allow us all to move forward in harmony. I opened it, skimming past the preamble full of sugary language about family unity and mutual respect, and got straight to the terms. It was, quite literally, a document stating that I acknowledged all 3 properties as Michael's exclusive assets, that my contributions were considered voluntary family assistance, and that I waived any future claims to ownership, income, or decision-making rights over them. In other words, they expected me to legally sign away any chance of ever having a say in the properties I had paid for, worked on, and emotionally invested in for over a decade. I didn't even argue. I just closed the folder, set it aside, and calmly pulled out my own folder, a full printout of the financial history my advisor and I had assembled. Page after page, line after line, every dollar I had spent, every bill I had covered, every payment I had made, all neatly organized and color-coded. I laid it out on the table, watching Michael's face shift from defensive to uncomfortable to silent. His mother, however, had no such restraint. She exploded almost instantly, voice rising with every word, accusing me of meddling in family business I didn't understand, of trying to rewrite history, to make myself look like some kind of victim, of not understanding how their family worked and why these protections were necessary. According to her, I had no right to question what she called generational planning, as if I was some gold digger who had wandered into their sacred family dynasty and was now trying to lay claim to things that weren't mine. That was the moment I snapped. For years, I had swallowed my frustration every time she made a passive-aggressive comment, every time she insisted on inserting herself into our decisions, every time she treated me like a temporary inconvenience rather than Michael's wife and partner. But not this time. I told her, with absolute clarity, that until there was a proper legal agreement in place recognizing my share of these houses, every house I had contributed to financially and physically, I would not be discussing or contributing to any joint expenses at all. Not one more cent of my money would go into her precious family legacy until my name was legally attached to it. I expected another screaming match, maybe even for her to demand that Michael kick me out of the house entirely. But instead, something surprising happened. The next evening, Michael came home alone. For the first time in what felt like years, his posture was deflated, his voice lower, his expression stripped of all the smugness and defensive bravado that had defined our recent conversations. Without making excuses, without trying to blame me or frame me as the unreasonable one, he admitted that he had been under enormous pressure from his mother from the very beginning. Even before we got married, she had been in his ear, warning him that wives couldn't be trusted, that marriages could end at any moment, that smart men protected their assets, no matter how much they loved their partners. He told me that for a long time, it had been easier to just go along with her plans than to stand up to her. The trusts, the hidden ownership transfers, the separate accounts, all of it was part of a larger scheme she had orchestrated to keep me from ever having any real claim to the family's properties. He admitted that it was wrong, that he had hidden behind her manipulations to avoid uncomfortable conversations with me, and that he understood now how deeply it had eroded my trust in him and in our marriage. Then he made an unexpected offer. He suggested that we go to an independent lawyer, one with no ties to his family, to draft a postnuptial agreement. Technically, it would function like a prenuptial agreement, except after the fact, explicitly recognizing my financial contributions and guaranteeing my share of ownership in all 3 properties. I would officially become a co-owner of our home, and my stake in the rental properties would be legally documented, including voting rights in any decisions related to selling, refinancing, or major renovations. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than living in the limbo I had been stuck in for years. I agreed, but with one condition: his mother would have no involvement in the process. No opinions, no legal advice, no side deals. This was between us and us alone. He agreed. Now, we're in the final stages of drafting that agreement. My name will finally be on the house we live in, and my share in the rental properties will be formalized, along with a clear framework for how decisions will be made going forward. It's not everything I wanted, but it's the first time I've felt like I had any real agency in my own marriage. My mother-in-law, predictably, has barely spoken to me since this all started. The few times we've crossed paths, she's made sure to let Michael know I was poisoning him against his own family, that I tricked him into giving up family assets to an outsider, and that I was undermining everything she worked to protect. For the first time, though, Michael didn't cave. He told her directly, and in front of me, that she would no longer have any say in our finances, our properties, or our marriage. Do I trust him completely now? No. It's hard to unlearn the kind of deceit I've uncovered, and it's even harder to believe that someone who stood by while I was excluded for years has suddenly transformed overnight. But at least now, for the first time, the reality of our finances will match the reality of my contributions. At least now, there's some protection and some truth on paper.